service. So it was not really a national trained army and national police. That was the Mujahideen group who just wore the uniform of national army. But now we have national army and national police. It's not 100% trusted by the public, but it is getting much better. The national army is more trusted by the public because they're behaving or they're trained properly, better than the police. Police is also getting much, much better than it used to be. But of course, it's still, we need the support of the international community. So we will have 3 transitions this year in 2014. One is the security transition, that the international forces might leave Afghanistan completely in 2014, towards the end of this year. But we do have a strategic partnership signed between Afghanistan government and a lot of other countries internationally, including the US. So this bilateral security agreement, which is part of the strategic partnership between Afghanistan and US, is not signed. I think you followed and you heard that it's this agreement between the 2 leaders or leadership in both countries. But I think that the people of Afghanistan, the majority, even the one who were invited in the Loya Jirga recently, they decided that we need to have this bilateral security agreement with the US for the stability of Afghanistan. So hopefully it will be solved in a few months. But on the security transition, it was very much focused on military part of the transition, not really on the civilian part. Because unless the people support the government, we cannot only bring security with, even if we have 500,000 soldiers. So it should be supported by the public, by the people. So the civilian part was missing on the security, and it was not enough emphasis on good governance and accountability and justice in the country. The second transition that we are hopefully going through will be the political transition in Afghanistan, and then we are going to have an election in 5th of April next month. And it will be first time when the people of Afghanistan will choose their leaders, and hopefully it will be non-violent, smooth transition of power from one leader to another leader. And the last 40 years, at least I saw in my life few regimes. We had king and monarchy, and then we had the Republican. We had the communist regime, so-called few leaders, 4 of them at least. It was Taraki, it was Hafizullah Amin, and then we had Babrak, we had Najib, Dr. Najib. And then we had the Mujahideen government, we had Taliban government, and we have the current regime. And most of these regimes, the people of Afghanistan did not choose their leaders. It was imposed on them. So hopefully, this time the people of Afghanistan will choose their future leader. Yes, we had an election in 2004 and 2009, but of course the people participated and tried to fill that gap of their choice, but hopefully this time will be different, because in the last elections we knew that Karzai would be our president. So this time it will be a different person. And that will be a real success for the Afghanistan stability. Because of course we do not expect 100% fair and free election, but the people's participation and women's participation on the election will guarantee the transparency and credibility of the election. That's why we're really focusing on women's participation on the election, because the previous fraud was done on behalf of women or under the name of women in the previous election. So the third transition that we are going to face, and I hope that it will not have really a negative impact on people's life in Afghanistan, would be the economical transition that we will face. And that is because the troops in Afghanistan We had different countries choose to one province, and they had a big establishment called PRT, Provincial Reconstruction Team. So it was practically soldiers, but that was also confusing name for that presence of the soldiers, because the people were confused. Are they there to do a construction, or they are there to provide security to the people? And practically they were doing both. But those PRTs, most of them are closed down and they left the country. A lot of young Afghans were working as a translator, providing security and also logistic to these people, and they were getting quite a good salary, $2,000, $3,000, it depends on their jobs. And by closing those PRTs in different provinces, a lot of young Afghans lost their jobs, and that will have, of course, impact on those families. Those 40 to 50,000 Afghans who had job with them would belong to 40 to 50,000 families. So already we have a lot of unemployment in Afghanistan. So hopefully that the government will be prepared to handle somehow that issue. And connected to this economical transition in the country, we still have a lot of Afghans who unfortunately depend on humanitarian services. And there's not a lot of discussion on that issue. More than 37% of people in Afghanistan live below poverty level. And that requires humanitarian services. And we should not forget that. So by saying this, I think I'll stop here and willing to get more questions, because I could speak for 2 hours, but then everybody would get tired and confused. So I stop here and get questions, and I try to answer as clear as possible. Thank you very much once again to coming here and listening to our interest to Afghanistan and listening to whatever I say. So who would be first? There's a microphone, I think, on both sides.
Sorry. I'm curious to know what the Commission's relationship is with RAWA.
The Afghanistan Independent Human Rights Commission is a national human rights commission. It's a state structure. It doesn't have any connection with RAWA. RAWA is a group of women who, let's say, political women, but it doesn't have any connection with RAWA.
I've heard that, pardon me, I've heard that President Karzai has considered negotiating with the Taliban to maybe incorporate them into a future administration or government of Afghanistan. Do you think that overall doing that and stopping violence in the Afghan country would benefit women, or would that be outweighed by the detriments of having conservative Islamists incorporated into the Afghan government and into the law structure?
Well, thank you. It's a very good question. I think any conflict in any country requires political activity also, not only military activity, because we cannot really bring peace only with military actions. But to bring the opposition to the table for negotiation requires strong political will in definition of enemy. Yet we are not there to define who is our enemy. Sometimes we just say that they are puppet of the foreigners. Sometimes we say they are upset brothers. Practically, we don't know who they are. So I think we will not get them soon on the table unless there is enough pressure on them to come and sit on the table for negotiation. But what we are lobbying as a human rights activist, that any peace negotiation with Taliban or insurgents, as they're calling it, should be based on principles and values of human rights. the person or anybody from any side who committed war crimes and crimes against humanity cannot be forgiven by a person as a leader of the country. So that's a international crime, and nobody has the right to forgive that. So unfortunately, we have not done much on accountability and justice during the past 13 years in Afghanistan. That's why we were not able to bring peace and security in Afghanistan. So I think peace negotiation will be successful when the people participate, when the people support. There's not enough support by the public. But coming back to political process, if they stand for election, if the people really choose them, I personally don't mind, because it's the choice of the people and the majority of the people. We are not there yet. We have some people who stand for election, who doesn't have a very clear and good background, but if the people choose them, okay, it's people's choice. But it will not be the same Taliban as they were in 1990s. They already changed a lot. I mean, the one who were saying that having television is a crime, now they're sitting in television and having interview and talking about human rights and women's rights in the country. So there's a lot of change. They are also a human being. They will be able to change themselves. So, but we say that human rights and justice should not be ignored. The people should participate, and particularly women should be in that negotiation table. And we are not there yet. So I, as a citizen of that country, living through all these regimes and fighting with most of these regimes, so-called, I don't see a near future to have a negotiation with Taliban. So that is my answer.
I'm very interested in the situation of women in Afghanistan, and I'm wondering what the magnitude of problems surrounding violence against women is there, and who is trying to do what in order to confront that problem, and the kinds. I work in the United States in the area of domestic violence, and so I'm acutely aware that that problem is everywhere. Around the world. And my question is, how is it being dealt with, or rape being dealt with, or trafficking being dealt with in Afghanistan these days?
Yes, I think, as you said, that domestic violence and violence against women is existing everywhere. That's why we have CEDAW, which is Convention Against, all forms of violence against women. Elimination of all forms of violence against or discrimination against women, and it is, as you said, that it is drafted by an American, but you have not ratified it. And I think I keep saying that having CEDAW is itself a recognition and acknowledgement of existence of violence against women. So that's why we have this convention, international convention, for this. And also there's a lot of resolution, as you know, the 1325 is one of them, which was passed by a Security Council in 2000. And there's a lot of other resolution, 5, 6 more, to complete the 1325 resolution, which is women's participation in conflict resolution and peace building. And that is also the recognition of the importance of women on those peace building. I don't think peace will be complete without women participation. Sorry, I gone far from the domestic violence. But yes, it exists everywhere, and in a more brutal form in Afghanistan, unfortunately, because of lack of accountability in that country, because of violence in the last 35 years, because of lack of law enforcement. But what is happening in the country, for the first time in our history, we have equal rights for men and women in the Constitution. When we were passing or drafting the Constitution, we really worked hard in order to add the word woman in the Constitution, because they were saying citizens. And we were not happy only with citizen, because in the previous constitution of the Afghanistan, citizen was mainly referred to the men, because all the citizens of the country should go to military service when they were 21 years or 22 years old, and it was all men. So the constitution was not talking to us, or was not familiar to us. So we really pushed for adding the word women in the constitution. And then recently we have 2009, we have the Elimination of Violence Against Women law, which criminalized domestic violence against women, or act of violence against women. And it is not perfect 100%, but this is exceptional in the region that we have it. So, but of course the question is to implement the law. We try hard to implement, and it's already enforced. And for first time, the Ministry of Women's Affairs and the Ministry of Finance published the report of implementation of the violence against women. So it is there, and we try really to keep the people accountable. But the problem is that usually they commit the crime, as they recently, I don't know if you saw, the husband cut the nose in the upper lip of a woman in Herat. But he ran away. So it's easy, the border is open, they go either to Pakistan or to Iran, and then, or they go to the Taliban area, and then you cannot find them. But because of the corruption, because of the conservative opinion and mentality within the judiciary system, sometimes they go unpunished. But we are in the right track in order to push for the implementation of this law. And I hope that we will be successful. At least this is a law for first time in the country, and there is a force behind that law to implement it and to give some kind of protection. I have to say that it's first time in our history that we have shelter for women. And I began the first one when I was Minister for Women's Affairs. And now we have shelters in most of the big cities for the women who are facing problem and do need protection in those houses. It is a lot of resistance against it, but we also resist against the conservative forces within the society. But it's more recognition of women's presence in the society. In this coming election, for first time we had a conference. We invited, the Human Rights Commission invited the candidate to speak about women's rights and human rights in election. This was held on 11th of December. And they appear. I mean, the most conservative candidates appear and spoke about the women's rights in human rights in election. So there are improvement, and I think the clever one tried to adjust themselves to the need of the environment and the people. Thanks.
This question is on behalf of someone up on the balcony, so I got the text. We know women in rural areas have different experiences than those in the main cities, such as Kabul. They may have more hardships because of the conservative nature. So the question is, while you were minister, what program did you introduce to bring positive impact on women in rural areas?
Yes, I think there's a big difference between women who lives in the big cities and the rural area. Unfortunately, most of the women who lives in the rural area, they're uneducated, and that itself is a problem. And they're living in poverty, which also cause a lot of violence against women. But the women who are living in the cities, who are educated, they have different situation. And I think it's not only in Afghanistan, it's everywhere. There's a big difference between the big cities and the rural areas. I don't know in this country because at least in our part of the world, it's a big difference. Even in countries who are not in conflict. But I was only 6 months as a minister for Women's Affairs, And for 2 months, I didn't have an office. I was walking around and trying to get a building because most of the ministers were saying that we can give you a room or in one of the building that was an office for a prime minister. And they also said that they can give me a room over there, and I didn't want to go there because I had really bad experience during Hafizullah Amin, who was in power, and I lost my relative and my husband, so I was going to that place almost every week to find my relative. So I didn't want that building. I'm not very happy to go to that building, even if there's other programs. But no, I was insisting, no, I want an independent office. So I was able to get the building, which was previously a women association building, and I got it from the Minister of Social Justice, a social worker. And it was really destroyed. So the first I got the building around 20th of February 2002, and then I wanted to have 8 March after the oppression of Mujahideen regime and Taliban regime against women to hold 8 March as an International Women's Day. So there was a cinema attached to this building which was named Cinema Zainab, and it was named on behalf of a woman, and it was burned by Taliban. Then it was very interesting because when I got the building, there were no electricity, nothing. It was really destroyed. So I looked for money to rebuild the ministry. And particularly for this 8 March, preparing myself to hold 8 March. And I remember that the American ambassador wanted to give me $9,000 to clean up this cinema and prepare for 8 March. And he sent message. We didn't have a lot of telephone. It was only 50 or 60 telephone set by Ericsson. It was big orange telephone, which was given to high officials, including me. So the American ambassador sent message that I should go to the embassy to sign this contract for cleaning this building. I said, well, I'm a minister, so the ambassador should come to my office. And United Nations Development Program gave me 1 desk, 1 computer, 1 satellite telephone, and 1 chair. So again, thanks to the women's group who bought a satellite telephone for me. It was an Urgent Action Fund from the Canadians. And then Feminist Majority promised me that they will pay the bill. So I was very cautious not using the telephone. The telephone which was given by UNDP to me, and I was not using because it was $3 per minute. And I said, I don't know who's going to pay the bill. So when the American ambassador said that he's coming to my office, I didn't have the second chair for him. So it was a lady from Sweden. She was responsible for human rights in European Union office. She came to see me, and my office was so cold, and I had no heaters, nothing. She talked, and then she went quietly. She came back with 2 electrical heaters under her arm. And I said, thank you very much, but I don't have electricity. So that was the condition of Ministry of Women's Affairs. So I sent one of my colleagues to buy plastic chairs, the beach chairs that you use here in going to beach with those strips, what you call it in English, for the American ambassador. So that was the condition that I faced. I have not done much for women on that time. The only thing I did actually after taking the position I said that the women who were working as a teacher and as a public servant in different ministries in offices, their absence from the job should be counted on their promotion. So that was the first agreement that the first order from the president I got on 8 March 2002. And then we had the Loya Jirga, and then emergency Loya Jirga, it was a big resistance against me because I was calling for accountability and justice. And a lot of people doesn't like me because, not a lot of people, a powerful people doesn't like me because they feel that I'm threatening their power because of access to justice and accountability. I hope that I answered your question.
What effect do you think the complete or substantial withdrawal of American troops will have on Afghanistan in general and on women and girls in particular?
Okay. I think, as I said, that our national security forces are better, they are in place, but they still need training, mentoring, and equipment from the international forces, including American troops and NATO forces in Afghanistan. I think their presence is giving kind of a confidence to the people, and it will help the stability of the region, not only Afghanistan. So I think their presence